Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in to this conversation today with the International Institute of Family Development and its partners, EdFu Foundation, Young Boss Media, State of the African Diaspora, and iGambia. We are grateful that you all have joined in with us today to have this conversation, to be a part of this dynamic and important event that's talking about the social and economic conditions that we're facing here in the United States, especially around police brutality, and the need for Africa to reach across to the United States, to African Americans in the United States, and for us to join hands together. To open this up, it is only fitting and it is only right if we pay tribute to the ancestors before we do any introductions of ourselves, because it is but for them that we are here, that we have breath within our bodies, and we're able to do the work that we are here. We will start with those who have left us and been stolen by brutality and senseless violence. We will call out and say their names. We will call out the name of Emmett Till, Tanisha Anderson, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Felido Castile, Amadou Diallo, Eric Garner, Oscar Grant, Sean Bell, Freddie Gray, Anthony Hill, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, George Floyd. We give honor and respect, and we ask for their blessings. We ask for them to have peace in their journey and their transition to be in power. With that, I thank you and open this panel for introductions. We have with us today Dr. James, Professor James Small, activist and historian. We have Josephat Moses from the Center for African Volunteers in Kenya. We have Michael Bemblau, the Atlantic Media Services of Nigeria. His Excellency R.J. Mahdi from the CEO of Made in Africa Project. We have Her Excellency Dr. Harris Barrow, former Vice Prime Minister of the State of the African Diaspora and the Ambassador to Panama. We have Robin Shaw from Guyana, an African and a global citizen. We have Patrick Benjamin from the National Youth Coordinator, Director of Town Crier News Platform. We have Kevin Myles, founder and president of the Community First Solution, and Makwa Luthkonde, and if I mispronounced your name, as I know that I have, please forgive and restate that. From Uganda, a former statesman, a former national spokesman to the Democratic Party, and a statesman. Welcome. To start us off, the question on the table is, what is the imperative? What are we facing now? And why is it important for unity amongst Africans, no matter where we are in the diaspora and in the continent? Dr. Small, Professor Smalls, please start us off.
Well, I think the most fundamental question has to be the African across the world dealing with an African identity. We tend to identify ourselves with the national states we live in, rather than to identify ourselves with ancestral culture and our race. We do that when we get in crises, but normally we identify with geopolitical states. And I think that's necessary because that's a part of the reality of the world. But we also have to identify ourselves with our race and culture. People usually say to us, oh, there's so many cultures in Africa. Yes, we're a big people. We are close to 1 billion+ people. But those are not cultures. Those are ways of expressing culture. Culture is the value system that undergirds the cultural tools of theater, dance, drama, painting. There's a communal, collective, cooperative, undergirding philosophy. In short, a culture really is your ideology, but you must develop it to meet the contemporary situation we're in. I mean, culture is the thing that protects the people from mental genocide. And if you can't protect yourself from mental genocide, you can't protect yourself. Culture, in short, would be considered our immune system. And so when we think of being African, we come in all tones. And we were in all tones before we met white people. Just go back to ancient Kemet and ancient Egypt. We had all shades of brown, you know, and we understood we were oneness because of the value system that undergirded our culture. That was our ideology. That was our spiritual sacred science. And we didn't lose it. One thing we have to accept, we've been virtually at war for more than 2,000 plus years, at war. Someone fighting us, invading us, you know, the Hittites, the Hyksos, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, and then the Western Europeans. And
Are we at war now?
We're at war right now. Racism is an act of war. Slavery was an act of war. We didn't volunteer for a work program to leave our motherland. Somebody captured us. And in doing so, they killed our family in that village. They burnt our village down. They terrorized and scattered our people just to get the handful they wanted to get to some ships to come and do free labor for them and to bring our technology of agriculture for them. We have been at war. The same people who led this war is in total denial of the consequences of the war. Now, we refer to that consequence as white supremacy and racism, but that's the consequence of a war that they've waged against another people for material reasons.
So it's an economic war that we're fighting right now.
It's an economic war. It is a political war. It is a culture war. And if we don't win the culture war, the political and economic victories won't matter. We've seen that. We've won enormous economic victories. We've won enormous political victories. Look at the continent. We've freed ourselves at least of the occupation of colonial slavery. But the cultural victory that will inform us ethically, morally, and principally about who we are and what kind of society we want to build, that has been shattered. And we've got to restore that because economics is the foundation. Politics governs that foundation, but culture gives it its ethical and moral parameters.
The International Institute of Family Development has a campaign going, and this campaign is to create, establish, and support the development of 1 million jobs in the continent of Africa by 2030. It is an economic imperative that we see that we be able to have Africa beyond aid, to have Africa to be sovereign, to utilize products and services and goods that are made in Africa. Your Excellency, RJ Mahadi, please come in and let's talk a bit more about Made in Africa and the importance for economic development here.
I guess I'm muted there. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. And in what you just explained, even in seeking to bring 1 million jobs to the continent, this is the purpose of, you know, everything that our organization and our partners have committed ourselves to, not just so much the million jobs, but the economic impact that bringing that kind of revenue and human resource and you know, materials to create not just jobs but new businesses, land ownership, putting our people in a position to be the decision makers over their lives. And so we see in what's happening right now in the West, in the US, with the behavior that has been shown to our people, we believe that this will continue until our people have our own. And so in building that, we have to come back to our homeland and reconnect with those who are also seeking to build, and that collaboration of the diaspora and the continental Africans builds what we need as a foundation to come home to.
So it's a relationship building for legacy, for wealth generation, for the African that is abroad and the African that is in the continent, so we can have a brighter future together, to look at the resources that are in the land. Can we imagine what it would be if we had a commodity trading system, that
Right.
those minerals in the ground, that we were able to mobilize and utilize ourselves in order to use them for our own advancement.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that's the economic development. Yeah.
Yeah, that economic development starts with just bridging the gap, putting people in communication with those who they work best with, and we work best with our own, and we see that here on the continent with the relationships that we build and the projects that we manage. It's a flawless partnership. More of us figure it out, we'll be able to make a bigger impact.
One of our goals for the International Institute is to support that work, the creation and building of jobs in industry and enterprise development through agriculture. Doing that through making sure that we can have a reduction in post-harvest loss, ensuring that we're supporting the value chain line across, ensuring that we can have opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses here in the Americas, the Caribbean, to go to the continent and do important work in partnership, support our presidents of African nations realize their national development plans. I want to hear more about that, please, from Josephat. Josephat, please come to and talk to us from the Center for Africa Volunteers in Kenya. Josephat Moses, let's hear about some of your thoughts for your work and your volunteerism. What does that mean to you around economic development, the platform that our brothers here have laid out?
Thank you so much, Veola, for giving me this opportunity and also inviting us to this panel. At Center for Africa Volunteers, we have a vision of promoting peace, sustainable development, and African unity. Let me speak to the aspect of economic development and why did we choose to volunteer towards economic development. As zeroing down to the first question that you asked, like where are we in this season? We are at a point where the African child or the African mind in the continent has been trained to seek for the white-collar job. It's a belief that the white-collar job is the solution to the economic development of our people in the continent. But progressively, as time has revealed, the white-collar job is not sufficient enough to give people, their daily meals. They're not sufficient enough to end poverty in the continent. And therefore, we are volunteering to educate our people to look for other alternative means of economic development, first of themselves, and second of their nations, and third of the continent. Now, we volunteer to educate people on the agricultural prospects of the country. Statistically, for example, in Kenya and the rest of the African countries, we have 60% of untilled land. Africa in itself has 60% of arable land that can typically feed the world. But again, because of the brainwash that our people have been undertaken to or through, we do not value agriculture. Our people do not value agriculture completely. And now 60% of the arable land is untilled, is not cultivated, because we are looking for other solutions where the solution is not found.
So we're looking outside of ourselves for the solution, and inside of ourselves, yes, inside of our resources, we do have the solutions.
Exactly. And we have, mentioning again, we have the issue of the green card that was brought to Africa. If you go to any cyber cafe, you will get thousands and thousands of young men filling the green card, the one who get out of Africa, looking for solution or economic independence outside Africa. That is a thing that we are really campaigning against. We are telling our people that we have the solution here. Now, how do we also bridge this gap? We are working, we have a program called Add Your Voice. In the program of Add Your Voice, we are reaching out to the Africans or people of the African descent in the diaspora to talk, also to contribute to educating our people in the continent to realize that the solution really is not in America, it's not in Europe. The solution is here at home.
Kevin Myles, I'm interested in you coming in and being a part of this conversation. The solution is within us, and the solution is to connect. In order to make sure that we have an opportunity to sustain and support ourselves. We're here in the United States of America, you and I, Kevin. Why is this conversation with our brothers and sisters, with our distant relatives in the continent really important to the work and necessary for the advancement and upliftment of Black people in the United States in the face of the genocide, the war that Professor Smalls has laid out? Kevin, let's hear your thoughts.
You know, and I was going to reference what Professor Small said in my response, because literally, the reason why we find ourselves fighting, you know, in these intractable battles against enemies and problems that we have the power to defeat, but they seem to go on forever, is because we are disconnected. All of us, wherever we find ourselves throughout the diaspora, we are a connected people, and we are suffering from the same ills as a part of the same war, regardless of where we are. Our ability to fight back and to mount an effective response that would allow us to take care of our own needs, provide for ourselves economically, and provide a better and brighter future for our people is within our means, but it is hampered by the fact that we are so separated, and we have been taught over many, many generations and hundreds of years to view ourselves as independent entities that have to fight these battles alone. We are fighting a unified enemy, and that unified enemy being white supremacy. And that white supremacist, the white supremacy issues that we are facing confront us in terms of economics in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Australia, in the United States, everywhere where we are. But if we would just unite with each other and trade with each other, which begins with communicating with each other and being educated on how we were separated in this diaspora and taking those necessary steps to forge that reconnection, we could find out that we have resources here in the United States amongst African Americans that could help to regenerate some of the economies in Africa. There are tools and skills and abilities that we have on the ground in Africa that could help to reinvigorate some of the communities that we have inside of America. We all have the tools that we need to, we are the solution that we're looking for. But all we've got to do is to understand that none of our struggles are individual struggles. None of us are actually fighting a unique battle. The battle that our brothers are fighting on the continent is the same battle that our brothers are fighting in Jamaica. That's the same battle that our brothers are fighting in Antigua. That's the same battles that our brothers are fighting all over the world. And if we could just, we as a people, could just get to the point where we can understand not only the steps that it took to disconnect us, but to reverse those steps and reconnect as a culture, we would find out that the resources, the energy, the information, the finances, all of the things that we need to become a stronger, unified Black nation we already have. We just have to put the pieces back together.
We're connected. We hear that. We feel that. Your Excellency, Dr. Barrow, I want to talk to you and bring you to be a part of this conversation. When George Floyd called for his mama, He was calling to me. I am a mother. I'm the mother that births both male and female into this space. As a mother, as a woman, we're all connected. I want to hear your voice and your thoughts around that, Dr. Barrows.
To the family of Mr. Floyd, we are all sharing in your sorrows with love and friendship. First of all, I would like to say that one of the things is when I watched the video twice. I couldn't watch it anymore. He was lynched. When I saw that video, that's what came to my mind. I couldn't believe. Well, I wouldn't say I couldn't believe. I just was so surprised that someone could do that in the daylight, in front of everybody, in front of everyone, and he was videotaped. So that tells me it's open season. It has always been open season. But something happened here. One of the things that we have to remember is that the elite created and uses money, the media, politics, and religion to provide a state of fear and ignorance that keeps us under its control. When we see this, that's when fear kicks in. We don't want to talk anymore. We want to go under the rock. We are afraid. I think it's changing. We're not afraid anymore. Even family members who have not directly experienced the trauma of slavery or colonialism can feel the effects of the event generations later. We are feeling it now. The elite has created an enslavement system, and we need to break free from its influence. I'm always saying that when I watch the protest, we don't realize the power that we all have in the world. I rather, if we are going to protest, they are protesting the way they are is because they're in pain. But those of us that are leaders, we have to go back and we have to figure out how can we handle this. We have to go back. Remember what I said before. It's about the money. It's about the fear in them also. That we have what we have in Africa and they need what we have in order to survive.
So let's get to the solutions.
So the solution is this. If you want to hurt, or if not, I wouldn't use the word hurt, but if you want to destroy this, what's happening, if we want to protest, turn off your television. If you want to protest, why is it that we're still shopping with Amazon? Why is it are we still shopping and purchasing Nikes and products? Let's boycott. We need to boycott. And I want to say something else. When it comes to the connectivity, we cannot connect until we are healed. We are having problems within ourselves. It's the mindset. The mindset has to change first before we can even come together. And that is something that we need to be working on.
Patrick, I want to bring you into the conversation as the National Youth Coordinator and in Nigeria. I really want to hear to the point, we see a lot of protests, no matter here, there, in the Caribbean, or in the UK when things happen to folks of color. We're coming together today for a social and economic platform, looking at what is necessary, one, to keep African youth in the continent and working and doing well, and providing opportunities and bridges so that those in the diaspora can contribute to the sovereignty and development of Africa through an economic platform of establishing 1 million jobs on the continent and enterprise development. What are your thoughts from the youth perspective of the solution that is necessary to make these things happen?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here. It's a privilege to speak to the world as regards the current crisis necessitating and militating against the advancement of Africans globally. In response to your question, we need to understand the fact that the crisis going on here, I like when one of the speakers said, the problem Africans are facing in the United States is not different from the problems Africans are facing in Jamaica. So what is going on there is as well going on the continent. And the reason is very simple. Those who continuously put African under perpetual servitude and slavery have taken over the economic power of Africans. In the first place, no African will want to leave the African continent to a different continent where he or she knows that he or she will be subjected to mistreatment. No one will want to leave one's country or one's continent. But as a result of the economic backwardness as a result of the infrastructural decadence on the continent itself, has forced young Africans to travel out of the continent, hoping there they will get greener pastures.
So,
We need to
does
understand.
I want to understand. So, yes, the infrastructure, there's lots wrong, and there's lots wrong in the West. But when you think about those who leave the Africa to come here, I think something occurs. And I'm really interested in the panel doing that. You no longer become a Nigerian, a Ghanaian, or a Malawian. You become a Black person. And in the United States, that has a context. And that context that we're seeing is economic disadvantage. It's a system that permeates through our healthcare sector, through our education sector, and through our judicial sector, including police brutality. I'm wondering how much better is it, or different, is it to be able to come to this country and as Amadou Diallo stand in your doorway and receive 41 bullets in your body versus being within your country and having poor infrastructure, understanding that it's the leftover remnants of colonialism. I think I'd rather have my child be alive and uncomfortable than to be dead in a country that has all of its amenities. I think that's something for us to think about as we think about this connection of moving or partnering with those here in the diaspora. There's plenty of really smart people here that I believe can unite and join forces to make sure that those infrastructures that creates harm for us in the continent can be lessened, so that our lights, we don't have lights off, that we have constant and consistent electricity, that we move to solar powered consistent energy, we move to wind energy. So those are some thoughts that are running, and I'm interested in bringing you, Robin, on. Robin, let's hear some solutions and thoughts from an economic standpoint that you have.
Thank you. Can you see me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I appreciate you actually bringing me on. I'm not an expert in economics or any of that. And I do want to give thanks to Dr. Amos Wilson for his work that he has done. Also, Dr. Smalls that's done a lot of work really throughout the years. And I've made some notes here. And again, the person that I have used as a kind of a medium to actually take me through some of what I've learned is Dr. Amos Wilson. And Dr. Amos Wilson had wrote this book here, which is a Blueprint for Black Power. And that book to me is my quote unquote Bible. And what it has is information on the whole structure that we need to implement to actually take us to the next level. Quickly, I just wanted to reference back to what you asked Patrick, which was in terms of being in Africa under the conditions of infrastructural damage that was done, and that the people are not being able to function in those countries. So some of them come to the United States to survive. And kind of like some of it also, I would go back to where there's a scene in Roots where Kunta Kinte actually was going to get free, but then his family was really locked in the system, and then he made a decision just to stay in the system here and to deal with that versus to go back to freedom. So some of that is what's going on, where people are kind of caught up in a different environment. So once they're here, once they're in that environment, they cannot leave per se because the structure has changed. So going back to what everybody has said, which is really, I find this panel to be really great, which is, and I wrote a few notes down for a few people, and I may have missed some of their names. Where I think it was Kevin that talked about the unified enemy that we have. So all of this is coming into play. So going back to my quick input on this in terms of the economics, I think that we have to actually have a base for our growth forward. The blueprint for Black Power should be read by every African person because it's a blueprint. It was written by Dr. Amos Wilson, who really took his time and wrote a book with over 700 pages, and it breaks it down. And some of what you're doing, Viola, is that, which is part of the communication. I think we need to kind of understand and have a baseline, and then we'll take it from there. All of the information is in the book. I just want to read a small section and then I'll be done. I don't want to take up much of your time, right? So let me see if I remember the page that I was on. I'm trying to see if I can remember this section quickly. Okay, so this small section that I'm reading from the book, The Blueprint for Black Power by Amos Wilson, written over 25 years probably ago. And he says, to paraphrase Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the African is born free, but he is everywhere in chains. Throughout this volume and in hundreds of volumes and papers scattered around the globe, we have chronicled the material suffering and political vacillations of Africans at home and abroad. The largest proportion of these situations brought on by hands of alien people. However, a crucial and substantial proportion of African suffering has been and is wrought by their own hands. Black nationalism recognizes that the power of African people to achieve liberation and self-determination lies within their grasp. African liberation and self-determination will not and cannot be willed or given to African people by non-African people. They must be won through the self-sustained exercise of power generated by Africans themselves. And I do think that this panel is part of that. So that's my input on that.
I appreciate that. I want to bring Kai and for you, please, when you do come forward, do pronounce your name in the most beautiful way that it is. As a statesman, as we're thinking about liberation, the opportunity for self-determination, this conversation we're having today is not about division. It is about unity, and it's about standing our ground economically and socially to have our humanity validated amongst ourselves as African people living in the diaspora and in the continent, but also to say, as the NAACP has put out, and I will use their hashtag we are done dying. From a political standpoint, what is necessary? What are the solutions necessary for our humanity to be dignified, understood, valued from your perspective from Uganda?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank everyone who made a statement there. I want to thank Professor for his statement about the mental slavery. He emphasized so much on culture. I think that is the point. We have to emphasize, you know, a river that forgets where it comes from dries off. So to me, the question on the political undertone, you talked about what are the imperatives. First of all, you gave the names of those who perished or were racially killed in America. I want to add one person, Mr. Olango from Uganda. In September 2016, he was killed in California when the sister called the police to take him to mental health. Instead, because he's a black man, They shot him dead. He's from Uganda. So what are we talking about today? I think this is overdue. First of all, we have to do SWOT analysis on ourselves as Africans. You realize that for many years we have been in bondage. They have deconstructed our mindset to poverty mind. They ideologically changed their mindset by creating anything black, evil, anything Africa, evil. We used to invent, we used to cure, we used to do everything in Africa, but when they came with the white God, everything Africa became evil. I think it is high time we reconstruct our mindset as Africans. The most important thing is to reconstruct the mindset and then know that we can together, because we are looking at how to empower both diaspora and people at home, their socio-economic transformation. And how can this come about? Politically, I think we need to do a lot. You realize that in Africa, we have leaders who have been in power for 3 decades, like in my country, in Uganda. We have a president who has been there for 35 years, people in dire poverty. And therefore, in many African countries, I may not mention all, but I see we need to create a critical mass of democrats, not dictators, so that we can come with policies. For example, if you have critical mass of leaders of Democrats, they can pass laws, diaspora laws in Africa, whereby any person in a lost nation, those taken as slaves, those who came and lost their citizenship, should have the freedom to go to any country of their choice, free of charge, and that must be legalized. But the challenge is that we have to first clean our household back home. The biggest challenge is that we're in a bottle. We don't know we're in this together.
I don't know if we have time to do both. Here in the United States, we are in a state of emergency. And though it would be nice to have a clean house when our relatives come to visit us, the situation is so dire that it might be that we might need to clean our houses together and give ourselves tasks within the house in order to make sure that it's livable for both of us. But I think that if we wait again, we will have tomorrow and next week with another demonstration, with another situation.
Excuse me. What about to conclude was that we need to understand that we are one. The Africans who came through slavery do not love those who came through other means. So we are all black people. We should think that we are all together, we're in a bottle and biting ourselves. From now onwards, we should be like the Native Americans who were massacred, went through genocide, but they thought of coming with an economic activity. Like in the US here, they have several casinos and they make millions of dollars tens of millions of dollars every month and every year. So I think we Africans in America and the diaspora here must start looking at ourselves as brothers, love each other, and come with economic strategy that can transform ourselves. Africa, like Doctor said, we can even come up with a bank for Africans. So I think it's high time. The death of Floyd, may you rest in peace, should unite us other than divide us. That is my call.
I appreciate your point. I appreciate your points. I think for the largest scale, when we look at colonialism and supremacy that has impacted people of color, no matter where we are, both who I sit in within my DNA is Cheyenne and an African, indigenous to this country, and definitely related and connected to the continent. It would be a wonderful opportunity should all Black and brown people unite economically in order to understand and thwart and dismantle racism and all of its practices that shows up. And looking from an economic front and a policy front, the International Institute has a couple of thoughts that he would like to put on to the table for reaction, starting with Professor Smalls. So this conversation is not merely about just a talk. It's the start of a broad and deep network to think through and put a platform for social and economic advancement together. This is not the first time that this has happened, but this is a very new day and age in which we will say again and again, we cannot no longer go around and saying hands up, don't shoot. We must have some political and economic platform for us to move forward. So we have a 5-point mobilization strategy, and we'll start with point 2, which is around organization. The International Institute is extremely interested in what it would look like for judicial associations in Africa, law associations in the continent, to join together with civic leaders here in the United States, Black law associations, to address violence and racism, not to win lawsuits, but to set legal precedents. The second point under organize, we're interested in figuring out and wondering, what would it look like if rigorous anti-racism training and thorough background checks were mandatory for neighborhood watch associations to ensure folks that go around and monitor their neighborhood that killed our brother who was jogging or killed our son who was walking from the store with a bag of candies can thwart police brutality. We're also calling for shared governance, making sure that citizen review boards are there to have people with lived experience that have experienced violence, to have authority and regulatory and investigative power to ensure violence that when it occurs, that is investigated fairly and accurately on a local, state, and national level. We're looking to make sure that we have some policy creation to do 2 things. 1, to ensure that police officers carry their own liability insurance, just like doctors and social workers and others, so that when things occur, taxpayers are no longer with the burden of paying for these incidences, that it absolutely impacts directly police officers when they misbehave. Not all police officers are terrible or bad people or doing wrong things. There are many good people who wear the blue uniform. There are some bad actors that do things that create conditions that cause huge amount of trauma and pain. Secondly, under the policy creation, we're asking for and wondering what it would look like to make sure sovereign immunity was removed from police, from the police departments, so that actual police departments can be held liable. And I think the last and most important of these requests that we're looking for, what would it be if the African Union and the United Nations condemned publicly acts of racism and police brutality here in the United States, and if continued to bring forward to The Hague crimes against humanity? Those are the thoughts that we're roaming around our head, imagining what we could do if the world would look like that. But chiefly, what would it look like if the world in which we live in, Africans, no matter where we lived, were sovereign, Africa was sovereign, that Africa's land space, we would be able to go back, have our passports visa-free, so that we can enter the continent, enter the home of Africa, help to rebuild it so we would have a place to be called home. Because if we are hunted, as our brother was hunted when he was jogging, it calls into question, what do we do next that is the right thing? And economic advancement seems to be our thing, the thing that we're at war. Professor Smalls, what are your thoughts on some of those points, and help us guide us to where the right direction as an elder here? You're muted.
Okay. I'm going to do a statement tonight on this issue, and you covered some of the things I wanted to cover. One, there should be civilian review boards in every municipality to review any incidents of violence. Two, there should be there should be legislation in the local municipality to require anyone that wants to serve as a policeman in this jurisdiction must live in the jurisdiction. Your home must be in the municipality where you're working. Three, there should be a national movement to recruit, tutor, train, and prepare to pass the exams of young Black men and women. That should be a national effort. Now, the bottom line of all of this that we're talking about is, can any of us provide the necessary food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for ourselves and our family, wherever we are in the world? That's the real question. That's the bottom line question. Then the question comes, how do we do this thing? And that means we must control the economic, politics, and culture where we live. Then how do we do that thing? We must be in charge of the land, labor, and resources where we live. How do we do that thing? It comes back to culture and identity. We need to have a common history of ourselves. The curricula in the schools in Africa and Black America, the curricula of slavery, racism, and colonialism need to be dumped into the garbage. And the curricula that's based on our ancestors' actual historical response to the historical experiences they've had should be what socializes our mind. That gives us our values, our interests, and our principles. If we were to look at those things, because no matter, we have money. African American for the last 7 years have been spending over $1 trillion+. We're not poor. We have poor people among us, but as a people, we're not poor. Our mind is poor. Our understanding of how and what makes us African is poor. What is my relationship? And no disrespect, we should never use the term people of color. We're people of color. We are an international ethno-African. The Indians refer to themselves as Indians, Chinese as Chinese, Koreans as Koreans. They don't say people of color. Even though we will assist other people of color in their struggles, we have to have an identity and a label that clearly identify that this is our agenda and we're willing to share with any other human being, fight beside you, as we've always done, fight with you, all the people of color. But we have to distinctly define ourselves as an African people, period. And I think our focus on history and being informed by the experience of our ancestors' reaction to slavery, reaction to colonialism, and begin to reconstruct our spiritual institutions without feeling I've offended Christianity or I've offended, because I was a Muslim, I was an imam. When Malcolm X was killed, I'm the guy that took over at age 21. I'm a Hajj Amin Shaheed, but I turned from that back to my indigenous way of knowing and my indigenous way of practicing. I still have comrades and friends who are Muslims, but I practice the indigenous tradition of the continent of Africa in multiple states. And we have to raise up our culture so it has integrity, because it gives you your identity. And that's the glue. We got the money, we got the skilled minds. There's very few community that's got more skilled mind than the African world community. But we don't have that glue. The culture and the African spiritual integrity or sacred science is the missing glue that will bring all of this money, technology, land together. Everything in your program, I applaud. I mean, because those are all the things I want to see. But we need a glue. And that glue is to respect, even if we don't want to be in an indigenous African religion, let's give them the same respect that the rest of the world religions got. That's respecting your ancestors. If you don't respect your ancestors, who's going to respect you? And that's the bottom line for me.
Thank you so much for that. I want to give a shout out to the Exodus Alliance. The Exodus Alliance is 6 organizations, mostly people that I know, admire, and respect, that are assisting Africans in the diaspora with returning to the continent So there are opportunities and resources. There's opportunities and resources for investment in Sana Lodge, which is in Ghana, wonderful hotel, opportunity to make sure that we have a place to call home when we go to the continent, that we have a forum for economic advancement and development. The International Institute is leading work in Liberia around waste management with our partners on the ground. We are leading work in manufacturing PPE products in Southern Africa. We have opportunities for cannabis and hemp exportation. We're doing work in Nigeria with our implementing partner around agriculture. We are moving here. The International Institute is registered and operating in the United States of America, and we are registered and operating in the Republic of the Gambia. In addition, we have satellite offices available around the continent to ensure that we have the social and economic platform in partnership with all of our partners that were mentioned today to make sure that we can support our African presidents realize their national development plans, because we are the solution that we're waiting for. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will make a call out. I'll make a call out that our next call, we will make an invitation. We're hoping I'll make the invitation here to all of you to come back and join us, to make sure to bring your friends. We're hoping that our good brother, Julius Malema from EFF, can join us next time. Was not possible today, but we do hope that next time that he can join us, as well as some other thought leaders here in the United States that have been doing this work and throughout the continent of Africa. In closing, I want us to just remember that we are powerful, mighty people, that we are doing this work because the ancestors have called us to do so, whether we do that for an NGO or for-profit company as the International Institute. Thank you so much. Any other comments that we have before we close out?
I just want to thank you for putting this together. It was a wonderful concept idea, and we've carried it out. Thank you. Thank all of my comrade brothers and sisters from around the African world.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Another shout out to iGambia, our partner, Young Boss Media, Young Boss Africa for production and managing this event. Until next time, you will see us again on Juneteenth. Will be our next show and conversation. Until then, be safe, be dangerous, and powerful. Take care.